So let's now look at the algorithms inside LX480 and those which are sample accurate with the original 480L. So if you ever want to cycle through some of the original presets in the hardware, you can actually go to the preset manager here, and the original factory folder are all of the presets in the 480L. So when you're looking for sounds that are reminiscent of the original hardware, these are a great place to start. What we're going to do in this video is listen through to each of the original 480L's algorithms and give a brief description of what they offer. So we're going to be starting here with engine 1, and we're in a single engine configuration, so engine 2 is not actually going to be doing anything, so we can conceptually ignore that for the moment. And we're going to go through in this order. So we're going to start with the hall, then go to the plate. We're going to skip twin delays and panorama because these are not reverb algorithms, and then we're going to go to random hall and ambience. We're also going to ignore Random Hall HD for the moment too, because this was not available on the original hardware, and this is an advanced algorithm that builds on top of Random Hall that Martin Lind, the CEO of Relab, developed, and is a unique algorithm that kind of builds on top of the Random Hall but without the hardware-based restrictions of the time. So we're going to audition these different algorithms using a 8T style brass synth patch, and this was from a Juno synth. So let's play that without any reverb for the moment so you can get an idea of what this sounds like. So quite a dry, quite a tight sound, so we're going to add a bit of reverb to kind of give it some length. And we're going to start with the Hall algorithm, and the Hall algorithm was part of the original firmware version of the 480L, so it's one of the older algorithms on the hardware itself. So what you should be expecting from the Hall algorithm is to get this sense of blooming envelopment, and what that means is that the sound kind of surrounds the listener, but it takes a while to build up and reach its kind of maximum amount of diffusion. So let's quickly have a look at the Hall algorithm, and I'm going to set the mix to be 50%, and let's go. So let's move on to the plate room algorithm. And again, just like the original Hall algorithm, this was available in the first version of the 480L firmware, so it's one of the older algorithms. And in terms of its sound, it differs from the Hall because it builds up diffusion a little bit more quickly, but overall it's a little less dense. So what you should be expecting is not quite such a rich reverb, but one that builds up a bit quicker. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, which is to have it bypassed, then engage it at 50% wet, and then towards the end of the loop I'll set it to be fully wet. So now let's listen to the Random Hall algorithm, and unlike the Hall and plate room algorithms, this wasn't available in the initial version of the 480L. This was first introduced in the 4th version of the firmware and has an advanced randomization system which helps give the source more movement, particularly in the decay of the reverb tail, and it also makes sources appear wider, but it will still have some of the same characteristics as the traditional hall. So it will take longer to bloom and build up, but it will be more dense than the plate room once it has built up. So we have one more reverb algorithm to try from the original 480L, but before we get to that, I just want to show you a technique that I use when learning the characteristics of different reverb algorithms. So what we're going to do here is compare the traditional and original hall to the random hall. And I've created this section which is just one note stab, and then I'm going to listen to the tail. And by doing this is that I'm not getting the masking of new notes. So that means I can clearly hear the reverb tail until it decays away completely, and I can compare those two characteristics. So let's start with the traditional hall. Okay, I'm going to leave it on 100% wet this time. And now let's listen to that with random hall. So what I hear there is that you've got a wider stereo image because there's much more bass content in the random hall. You've also got more kind of movement. So not only does the left sound more different to the right, but you've also got this kind of slightly swirling feeling in the tail. So the final algorithm to try is the ambience algorithm. And this was also, like Random Hall, released in the 4th version of the firmware around 1994. And it uses the same sort of randomization technology as the Random Hall 2. But where it differs to all of the other reverb algorithms in LX480 is that it was designed to mesh and blend with the dry sound, just like the early reflection phases in a real space. So let's say that you've recorded a source in an isolation booth, or you want to add extra early reflection energy, the ambience algorithm is built for that. So hopefully what you're going to hear here is more coloration to the dry sound and a less lush reverb tail. So one final thing to note about the ambience algorithm is I generally prefer it on shorter reverb times, and there's also this parameter reverb tail level, and I usually like to turn that down to get the best results out of it. So let's just have a listen one more time with the reverb time down around 1 second, and we're going to reduce the size and also reduce the reverb tail level. And so this is going to make it much more heavy on the early reflections and less on the primitive reverb tail that ambience has. So now that we've looked at the different algorithms that were available in the original 480L, let's look at the additional extras that Relab have added that allow you to create sounds much more reminiscent of reverbs from the 1970s, like the Lexicon 224, as well as some of the features that we've added to allow it to have more of a modern sound like a Bricasti M7.